Now 5:33 p.m. We'll call this meeting to order. It has been duly posted as required by state law. We will begin with the invocation led by Commissioner Mike Mesmer. If we can all please rise.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dear God, on this day that we celebrate the Transfiguration on the Holy Mountain, please grant us mercy, and mercy to the people here, mercy on the people who live in the city here. And please look after the armed forces, the President, all civil authorities, the sick, the suffering, those in prison and in jail, the travelers by air, land, and sea, and have mercy on us all. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
And the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I want to thank the Visit Harlingen for joining us and putting everything together, and of course the CVB board for joining us as well. If we can read the conflict of interest.
Under state law, a conflict of interest exists if a commission member or certain members of that person's family has a qualifying financial interest in an agenda item. Members with a conflict of interest cannot participate in the discussion or vote on the agenda item. Are there any known conflicts of interest to disclose at this time?
None.
None.
Nope.
None. None.
All right, moving on. Linda.
Citizen communication. At this time, the public is invited to address the city commission and speak on any matter not specifically listed for public hearing elsewhere in this agenda. Please note that the city commission members may not respond to comments or deliberate on topics addressed. Mayor, we had no citizens sign up for citizen communications. Okay, so moving on to item 4. Presentation and discussion by Scott Josler, President of the Texas Hotel Motel Lodging Association, on the use of hotel motel tax funds.
Thank you so much for joining us and for being here to hopefully a very informative meeting for both the commission and the board. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. It's an honor to be here. Back in 1989, when I worked for the Texas Municipal League, I was their lead tax attorney, and I wrote an article called "What Cities Need to Know to Administer the Hotel Tax," and a copy of that updated version. In fact, I wrote in 1989, the year that Cassandra was born. Which is So it's been around for a while, as have I. And we update that article every 2 years after the legislative session to talk about what are the rules for expending the 9 categories of hotel tax, what's the 2-part test. I'm going to talk about that this evening, and feel free to interrupt with any questions. I'd rather cover what you want me to cover than the items that might come to my mind. So the hotel tax, my background, I have a master's in city management and a law degree. And I worked for the Texas Municipal League for 5 years as their tax attorney, and then their lead attorney, and then I worked as chief of municipal affairs for 2 Texas attorney generals. And then 24 years ago, I was recruited to come over to the hotel industry. In fact, I remember when they called me, I said, I don't really need to know. I don't really have any contacts in the hotel industry, and I'm not your guy. You don't want to hire me. And they said, Scott, we know how to run our hotels. We want someone who can establish relationships with the city councils and the county commissions and the legislature between the hotel industry and all those folks. And I said, well, if that's what you want, that is my background. So I'm here in that capacity. It's a treat to be able to be back with, my training with city officials. And in fact, I think the city manager and I have known each other for probably 30 years, maybe.
A long time.
A long time, yeah.
Was that when Cassandra was born?
Yes, but there's no relationship to that.
Scott, I graduated from the University of Texas before she was even born.
Oh, I know. That we are rich in experience.
Yes.
Rich in experience. So I'm going to talk about the rules of the hotel tax. When I used to do city official training. I would talk about all the different revenues that a city has. And I'd start out with the property tax and what are the rules for expending the property tax by a city council. And that would be for any public purpose. It could be for law enforcement, it could be for tourism, it could be for a convention center, it could be for streets and roads, any public purpose. And the same thing for your general sales tax, your 1% city sales tax. You could expend it for any public purpose. But then you have taxes that are dedicated taxes. That's like your sales tax for economic development. I think you have a 4B sales tax. And it's only for the purposes that were on the ballot. Or if you had a hospital district sales tax, you could only spend it for a hospital, or crime control for crime prevention. And so the hotel tax falls into the dedicated tax category. You can only expend it for the purposes that are specifically provided in that law. So if you don't find it under that Chapter 351 of the tax code, it's not, it may be a great expenditure, but it's not something that you can do with hotel tax. Which, if I were to lead by example, the mayor of Clarendon called me years ago when I was chief of municipal affairs for the attorney general. And he said, Scott, I understand you're the guru on hotel tax. Can you help me to understand if we can expend hotel tax on renovating or redoing our tennis courts in Clarendon? And I said, well, Mayor, it's a two-part test. The first part is every expenditure must directly promote tourism and the hotel and convention industry. Every expenditure, not most of them, all of them, must have a direct impact on tourism and hotel and convention activity. And he said, well, Scott, I am ahead of you already. I have a petition from the area hoteliers. They say that there's a bunch of regional tennis tournaments and they fill up the hotel, so they're in favor of us redoing the tennis courts with hotel tax. And I said, well, you have the direct impact test met. The second part is you need to fit the expenditure into one of 9 statutory categories. Now, at that time, actually, there were only 5 statutory categories when they asked. So I said, let's go over those categories, Mayor. The first category is convention centers or visitor information centers. He said, well, Scott, we could put out extra chairs at the tennis court. And I said, that wouldn't make it your convention center. It has to be primarily used for conventions. I said, the second category is registration of convention delegates. And he said, well, it wouldn't be that, Scott. And I said, Mayor, the third category is advertising and promotion. He said, well, we could post signs along the fence. You see that at school districts sometimes where the fences have different signs of businesses. We could advertise different assets of the community. I said, you could probably pay for the signs, but not the tennis courts. I said, category number 4, promotion of the arts. And he said, Scott, we could pipe in music. And I said, you might be able to pay for the music, but not for the tennis courts. I said, last category, Mayor, historical restoration and preservation. And he said, Scott, it's a really old tennis court. Now, the problem is, Mayor, I explained to him, you're not preserving it. You're not restoring it, you're putting in a brand new asphalt court. That's not historic restoration and preservation. That's basically putting in a new tennis court. So he said, well, Scott, with all due respect, I'm gonna ask for an AG opinion. And I said, well, I wouldn't do that. I worked at the Attorney General's office for 5 years at that time. And I said, these are people, the opinions committee, that would make the decision. 98% of the time they say what? No. And 1.9% of the rest of the time, they say heck to the no. I mean, they just don't ever say yes. It's usually a fact-based question, or you don't have that authority under the statutes. So they didn't take my advice. They asked for an opinion, and about 3 months later, sure enough, the AG's office said the city of Clarendon, even though it didn't meet the 2-part test for expenditure of the hotel tax, even though it directly promoted tourism and hotel activity to do a tennis court, there was no category under the law that a tennis court would fit into. So that kind of demonstrates to you the 2-part test. You need to both show a direct impact on tourism, which is bringing people from another city or another county into your area, and you have to have a direct impact on hotel activity. Now that could be activity from people who are already here in Harlingen, they're staying at a hotel, and maybe they're going to your birding festival, or going to your arts museum, or your historical museum, or going to other assets of the community. They're already here, and it's something that they do while they're here. Or it could be that they're here just for that event. and it extends a 1-day stay into a 2-day stay or a 3-day stay. So you need to directly promote tourism, bringing people from another area, and the hotel and convention industry. If it just said you need to directly promote tourism, it'd be enough just to have day traffic come in. But because it says you need to directly promote tourism and the hotel and convention industry, it means you need to both bring them in from another area and have some impact on hotels. Now, the impact could be for the existing guests, it could be new guests, it could be booking meeting space at a hotel, it could be a catering contract at a hotel, some sort of business benefit to the hotel industry. And you might say, well, why would this statute require a specific benefit to one industry, to the hotel industry? And if you look back at the statutes, when they first proposed doing a hotel tax, it actually didn't apply just to hotels. The first version of the draft applied to hotels, restaurants, and attractions. And restaurants got out of the proposal, attractions got out of the proposal, and the only ones left were hotels. And hotels said, well, you know what? We'll stay in under this law, but every expenditure that you make at least have some direct impact on our industry. If you're going to, taxes, both property tax and sales tax, and then add in a higher than normal hotel occupancy tax to boot. So that was the legislative compromise when they did the hotel tax, and part of the rationale of why they did that. So, all right, so you have the two-part test. Every expenditure must directly promote tourism and the hotel and convention industry. And then the other part is if it has that impact, then you need to fit it into one of those 9 categories. Let me do a little bit more discussion on each of those categories. Category number 1 is convention centers and visitor centers. For a convention center to qualify, like your convention center, you look at your old calendar of events for maybe the last year, and at least over 50% of those events, or over 50% of the people who attend that facility, need to be there for a convention or a meeting that is primarily out-of-towners or tourists. So you need to at least have it primarily used as a convention center would typically be used. If it's a purely local facility, it wouldn't qualify for a hotel tax. So it has a primary use test for the convention center. Visitor center also fits under that convention center definition, and that could be anything from a kiosk that has visitor information to a full visitor center or a portion of a building. And you could pay for the staff, the overhead, the brochures, all of that, the marketing efforts. That's under visitor center. If it's only a portion of a facility, you just cover the portion that is used directly to help visitors. So that's any questions about convention centers or visitor information centers. The second category is registration of convention delegates. That's more of a big city expense. When you're paying volunteers to hand out packets to a large convention of people, you can cover the cost of having that staff. Any questions about registration? Third category, advertising and promotion. Typically, communities spend between 30 and 70% of what they bring in on marketing. If you build it, they don't automatically come. You have to market what you're doing, and that's probably one of the most important expenditures, the hotel tax, marketing. And on marketing, there's a minimum of at least 1/7 of what you bring in hotel tax you have to spend on marketing. That's about 14.5%, but like I said, most communities spend between 30 and 70% on marketing. So any questions about marketing, advertising, and promotion? That would be the category that, let's say you want to sponsor an event, or you want to market some festival or something that's happening in your town. You would do that as a promotion under advertising and promotion. That may be if you have a sporting event that comes in, or you have some other event that comes in. It may not even be an eligible category, but you would go ahead and market it under the advertising or sponsored under the promotion category if it has an impact on hotel activity and tourism.
And would you only sponsor outside of the local area, or you can also do marketing within the local area?
That's an excellent question. State law doesn't limit you. Now, a lot of local communities in Texas say, well, we're only going to pay for marketing that has a circulation or hits people over 50 miles away, or they'll have some sort of definition like that. I always encourage folks to do both a little bit of local marketing and out-of-town marketing, because some of the local marketing can be banners around town that'll tell guests who are already at your hotels, this is what's going on, we have our birding festival, or we have this event or that event, and it'll tell them where they can go, and it adds to the ability to promote those facilities. Or even sometimes if you have a paper that comes out every day, if people are gonna look at the paper to see what to do in the town while they're there, you might wanna have a small portion that also goes to that. But you wanna, of course, market outside of the city, both in social media and in marketing on your website. And in all your marketing, you always wanna have a link to the CVB listing of hotels. And so that you can, and when people are funded, we always encourage that you have not only an application for funds, but that you have a post-event form. Because typically you have the application for funds, it'll say, how many tourists do you expect to come? How much overnight activity do you anticipate? How much you're gonna spend on marketing, et cetera, all that. What's important is that the post-event form should ask the same questions. You said you were gonna have this many visitors, how many visitors did you get? You said you were gonna have at least 100 room nights, how many were actually booked? You said you were gonna spend $10,000 on marketing, how much did you actually expend? That way you can compare apples to apples. Because otherwise what I find in a lot of communities, they'll have an application for funds, people will fill all that out, and then they require an event form after, or a report afterwards, but they don't ask all the same questions. So the event participants only focus on what they want to focus on, and you're never really able to measure what they promised. So advertising and promotion. One of the things you guys do under that, which we really appreciate, is you list all of your hotels on the state tourism website with a little bit of your hotel tax. And you do that for every hotel. So every hotel has some benefit from the CVB, from the hotel tax, for that website, and then our state website and a couple other websites. So that's part of the advertising and promotion. Any questions on advertising and promotion?
I have another question, kind of just going back to the convention center. So we have a convention center here in Harlingen, and if I understood correctly, say there is a conference, a big conference that is generally done on another part of the state, and we'd like for that to be in Harlingen. So is this something that through the hotel motel tax, we can provide the space at the convention center?
Absolutely.
So that
you could
way-
reduce the cost, or you could comp the cost. You could sponsor maybe a dinner, or you could do all of the above. You could do agree to do some of their marketing for them. What you can expect, every community in Texas is going to be looking at where events are going to. And if there's an event that's historically come to Harlingen, I promise you other folks are looking at how do we go ahead and offer everything Cassandra offered and then a little bit more in order to bring them to McAllen, or bring them to Beaumont, or bring them to Waco, or to Austin, or to another destination. You need to be doing the same sort of thought. Both how do we retain our existing clients and how do we attract new ones? And you want to make sure that you're sensitive, that they're getting not only what you've historically done, but how do we need to increase that or augment that, because that's what other people are going to be doing to bring that business. I always encourage communities to, before you do your budget, meet with your area hoteliers and find out, where are you getting your business from? Where do you get, what business do you get Monday through Friday? What business do you get on weekends? What is your biggest portion? Because when you look at the hotel tax, and if you think about it, cities, we want to run our cities kind of like we run our personal businesses, right? We want to spend the money wisely, spend it where you get the most bang for the buck. So if you were running a business, you would look at, I'm going to spend the most hotel tax where I get the most return. And if you talk to your hoteliers and your other tourism-related businesses, they can tell you, this is where we get the majority of our business during the week. This is where we get a lot of our weekend business. And you want to look at how much of the hotel tax are you investing in those areas. Then you want to ask them, what are the opportunity areas? If we put a billboard, if we did social media advertising, or what events could we add in that we're competitive for? Maybe sporting related events or other types of events. What periods of time are your shoulder season or slow season that we can try to incentivize more during those times to fill in that business for you? They'll be your best source of knowledge. And they can also tell you, when you're looking at, here's where we've historically funded hotel tax for, ask them, did you get business from these events? Because the hotels honestly know. They know by people who call and when people book rooms and they say, what are you here for? And they know whether or not that's an event that they had room nights for, or people are asking for directions to go to those events. They know where they're getting their business. That's how they operate. So any sort of incentive that you can do to try to attract business, Mayor, absolutely. Yes.
Winter Texan market is massive
Okay.
for the valley, but they'll tend to
Same
drive their
trailers,
bus,
their
or
RV.
Yeah, their RVs, or rent in or they have an RV park. But their family comes down to visit them, and they stay in hotels. Is that pushing the envelope too much?
You know, I would do it based on, I always encourage people, think about it from the standpoint, if you were a hotel operator, how much would you invest in promoting RV activity and promoting Winter Texans? You'd probably invest some, but not a lot, because there's a limited return. So it might be that you work with your economic development community because there's an overall benefit on what they want to invest, and you look at what portion of the guests or the ancillary impact of their families coming in can you tie to the Winter Texan activity. And then I'd expend a portion out of the hotel tax on marketing that tries to promote that sector. So I wouldn't spend $100,000 from the hotel tax to generate 10,000 in room nights. Because, you know, it just.
The other thing I'm picking up is that the people in the hotel industry actually know things, and we should ask them.
It's amazing.
I don't know if we've ever asked them anything.
I will tell you a story, and I've been around long enough to tell these stories and have experienced it firsthand. Years and years ago, Fredericksburg was not the tourism mecca that they are now. And what they ended up doing, because they found they had a lot of weekend business, they didn't have a lot of weekday business. They found that they weren't getting a lot of commercial activity from their guests. And they said, what do we do? And the first thing they did is they created a committee of the hoteliers to work with the restaurateurs, to work with the retail sector, to work with the city. And they all got together and said, what's stopping us from really getting a lot of tourists? And the first thing they determined is we don't have good parking in Fredericksburg. We have meters and people are getting tickets. So they took all the meters out of the downtown area, and then they extended the capacity for parking. Then they determined that, you know what? Our businesses are not open all, in routine hours. On some nights they're open, other nights businesses are not. Not all of them were open on the weekend. So they established uniform hours that all of the business owners in the downtown and tourism areas agreed to. And then they started working with their economic development folks to say, what are we missing? We have too many local businesses that have no tourism value in this one tourism area. What if we were to incentivize restaurants and retail and to promote historic structures and rehabilitate the historic value of the area? They did all that, and then they looked at, we don't have enough events. And so they created Oktoberfest during what was before a slow period in October. And then they looked at, what do we do during the weekdays? They said, well, what about senior citizens who want to take bus trips and want to come and spend maybe the night and at least come in during the day? We can at least support our restaurants so they have weekday business by doing a lot of bus tours. And by doing all those things, tourism went through the roof. And they had everybody at the table, including the CVB and the city leaders and the chamber and the businesses that were affected. Because a lot of times we keep repeating the same mistakes because, like you said, we haven't asked everybody. And the thing is, we haven't just asked them what's the challenge, we haven't asked them what's the answer to the challenge. And that's where I think y'all have around, I think, $2.5 million in reserve funds that have not been expended in hotel tax. So you're spending a little bit under what you bring in each year, plus you have a large, healthy reserve fund. I was talking to the city manager before I came up here this evening, and I would encourage you there are some really good consultants that you can work with that can talk to you about how can you look at spending that money that's consistent with the city council intent, what your goals are as a city council, what the city management staff feel is the priorities of the community, what the Visitors Bureau thinks will really promote hotel activity and tourism. And you can look at, what should we spend on branding in there? What should we spend on marketing? What about our current marketing strategy? what facilities do we need to add to the mix in Harlingen to take us to the next level? What kind of tourism activities are we competitive for that if we spend a little bit more money? So whether it's a new sports facility that you need or more marketing, more billboards, they can look at the whole mix and come back to you and say, this is what we would suggest, along with keeping enough money in reserve for future things that you don't anticipate. So I would encourage you to look at how can you, right size and look at the largest ROI from that money that you have in reserve so that you're getting bang for the buck. So yes, Mayor, you have a question.
Because I was listening to your tennis court story.
Example, yeah.
Yes, and so I was thinking, so Harlingen used to have the White Wings here in Harlingen, and so that was, we'd get people from all over the valley to come watch games here, and that kind of just fizzled out. And so we have a stadium, but we don't utilize it, and we have some events there, but really not to really maximize the potential of that space. So if we wanted to bring another team, is that something, because I was listening to the tennis story and you can't redo the tennis courts, but so what could you do if you wanted to say, okay, well, we want a soccer team or we want a baseball team or a basketball team? How does that work?
I love this, and you're asking the best questions, Mayor, and thank you for that. The 5 categories I described for you of convention centers, registration, advertising and promotion, then the promotion of the arts and historical, have been augmented by 4 additional categories. Okay. I know a lot about those 4 additional categories because I wrote all the statutes. So the legislature passed them, but I was the one who wrote the drafts. And the 6th category, and I'm going to go right to your question, is sporting-related events. So is Cameron County under 1 million population?
Yes.
Okay. So if you're a city within a county of under 1 million population, then you can now, under category number 6, expend hotel tax on the sporting-related event costs for any type of sport that's in your community if it creates a substantial amount of activity in hotels. And if a majority of the participants at that event, at that tournament, or that fishing event, or that volleyball or swimming event, whatever it may be, baseball, softball, if a majority of the participants are from another city or another county. So it can't be your local little league. But if it's something that brings in a majority of people from out of town, it's a regional, state, or national tournament or an event like that, that a majority of the folks are from out of town, you can pay all the event costs if it has a substantial impact on hotel activity.
Would that include the infrastructure?
It would include the event cost for that day. And then category number 7, and I will tell you, the way we did this, these changes, category number 6 was Charlie Culpepper, the mayor of Round Rock at the time, called me and said, Scott, we want to spend money on all the event costs for baseball events that we have in Round Rock. The Round Rock Express is a big attraction for sporting events in Round Rock and their baseball team. So we got that law passed to do sporting-related event costs. Then the next session, the new mayor, Niles Maxwell, said, Scott, you got us event costs. What about event facilities and the infrastructure? You know, can we renovate an existing sports complex or baseball stadium or a soccer or tennis or an aquatic facility if we can show it'll have substantial hotel activity? So we wrote a new category, category number 7, that you can expend it on sporting-related facilities. And you can expend as much as you want out of the hotel tax. But you have to show within 5 years, whatever amount you spent, you have that much in hotel night activity. So if you want to spend $500,000 on new bleachers or a new roof for your sporting facility, you spend $500,000, you have to show in 5 years you had $500,000 in hotel nights from events at that facility. It could be existing events that were already coming every year, or it could be new events that are coming because of all the improvements, but you got to show an ROI. And our thoughts were that we didn't want you to spend $500,000 to get 20,000 in room nights. We thought at least whatever you spend in 5 years show that you have gotten that much business back. And let's say after 5 years, you spent $500,000, but you only got 300,000 in room nights you could show from existing and new events. that $200,000 difference, you'd have to repay the hotel tax fund from the general fund. So there's a kind of a way to right that ship if that happens. 'Cause
Monitors that.
Thank you. That was my next question. That was my
Right.
next question.
Who's the policeman?
yeah, that would be me.
So, but is it on this post-event data that is being collected and then turned over? Or like how specifically is that tracked? Because it
Well,
seems.
the way I would do it is, well, one, we've had this law in place for probably, 7, 8 years. We have never challenged anybody's use of it yet. I think cities are doing the best they can when they spend the money and they understand the requirement. We haven't had any complaints from our hoteliers about how these facilities have, how successful they've been. It seems to have worked. But if there were a complaint, and I were to get a complaint from hoteliers, we would do an open records request to the community to find out what documents they have that show the room night impact of their facility over the last 5 years. We haven't had to do that. We haven't had any complaints. But the way I would manage that, because we want you to be successful, we don't want to play a game of gotcha. When I started 24 years ago as CEO of the Hotel Association, we had a $1.1 million fund to challenge cities and counties if they didn't spend the hotel tax correctly. Over my 24 years, do you know how much I've spent on that 1.1 million? Nothing. Nothing. Because I just would make a call to the city attorney or the city manager privately and say, hey, I saw you're using it for this. We got a complaint. Can we work with you to try to right the ship? And every time, because I know these city officials and I know the city attorneys, the city managers, they've worked with us. So we want to have a long-term relationship. So if there was a problem with your facility, we'd be calling you probably not on year 5, but year 2 and year 3. Now, what I would do to make that city facility successful is every time you book that facility, let's say you do it for a soccer facility or an aquatics facility or a tennis complex or a baseball complex, I would have one rate as your commercial rate, and then I'd have a lower rate if you have a room night block at Harlingen hotels. So give them a discount, take $200 or $300 off, and they will then document. To get that discount, they'll document, because a lot of times they'll have their event in Harlingen but book the rooms in another community. Or they won't even, have a negotiated rate or worry about a room block. They just don't attend to that. But if you give them a financial incentive and lower the cost, and then say, in order to do that, you need to show us, what your room block was, what the negotiated rate was, and what the actual pickup was, they will document. If you do that with enough of an incentive for everybody who rents a facility, you're promoting your own economic development and you're documenting exactly what the impact is. And then you also, by doing that, you get a mix for what percentage of those businesses or what percentage of those bookings at that center is currently overnight activity and hotel eligible activity, and what percentage is purely local. And you don't want it to be all overnight activity. You want to have benefit to the local community too. But you want to make sure you aren't spending more out of the hotel tax than you can attribute to the overnight portion. Does that help?
Yeah, no, that's great.
I have a question. Is this relegated only to nonprofit? Can it also be for profit?
Thank you. I'm going to say your questions are every bit as strong as the mayor, and I appreciate that. The state law does not relegate or limit you to only nonprofit. But a lot of municipalities will, under their own internal rules, will say we are only going to fund nonprofit arts or nonprofit grant applicants or nonprofit organizations that submit requests for funding. State law doesn't limit you. I always encourage it, like in Austin, commercial music venues are what bring a lot and sustain a lot of our tourism. Why would we only want to have the nonprofit sector funded? So if your impact is 100 room nights, it shouldn't matter whether you're for-profit or nonprofit, in my estimation. Based on the impact, should follow the funding. But that's a city council determination as to how they want to do that.
And is there like a number that we should strive for in terms of hotel stays for an event?
That's a wonderful question. What is a tourism event in Waco or in Harlingen is different than what's a tourism event in San Antonio,
Right.
or Dallas. And so really the guideline I would give you is I would look at what brings the majority of the business to Harlingen, what do you want to retain, what do you want to grow, and try to spend the money like almost a pyramid. Invest in the bottom, the biggest portion of your pyramid with the most funds, and go up where, you know, it may be that you have less impact, but then we'll give you less funding. I wouldn't spend more in hotel tax on an event than you can show that you'll generate in hotel nights. I mean, you'd be better off just to give the hotels the money, you know, and let them advertise their promotion
Yeah.
than to spend, you know, 10,000. I remember I went to a Marshall and was giving a talk to the city council, and the mayor's son was doing a balloon festival, and he had applied for a hotel tax. And one of the council members said, well, how many room nights do you do? And he said, well, we have 5 room nights that we've documented. And one of the hoteliers from the audience says, yes, and they're all comped. So, you know, we're getting actually nothing from the festival. And you don't want to spend hotel occupancy tax on an event that has very minimal return. But some events, the first year that you do them, you don't know. The best intentions, maybe they're going to have a lot of impact. So you might have a different standard for the first year you do that based on their estimated impact. But then after a year or two, they should have an idea of what they're going to be doing. So you should be looking at right-sizing the amount that you dedicate in terms of the ROI and say, if you do 10 room nights, here's what we make you eligible for. If you do 20 room nights, it might be double that amount. If you do 50, et cetera. So I'd look at your competition too. What are they providing in hotel tax funding as incentives? And say if we're competing with Waco, or we're competing with Beaumont, or we're competing with McAllen, then we're going to look at what their incentives are and what do we need to do to be competitive.
So earlier you said, so we need to get people either from, you know, coming from other locations or at least from another county coming into our area. So here in our region, people kind of travel to and from our neighboring counties pretty often, and it's hard to determine, are they really truly going to stay
Right.
in our you know, in our hotels if they're traveling from McAllen or if they're traveling from Mission.
Right.
Now, if they're, you know, Rio Grande City or somewhere further, then yes. So one of the things that, and I'm glad Javier is here, because there's, the Valley there's a lot of sports activity, but mostly for the younger kids, right?
Sure.
And then we have some teams, and the Vaqueros are gonna be here, the football team for UTRGV. But the Upper Valley has done kind of a really great job in providing fields with turf and just really, you know, I think they've got all the business, right, in terms of tournaments and things of that nature. And so there is a huge economic impact in Hidalgo County because people go to the games, then they go eat, and they go shop. But I don't know that they're truly staying in the hotels. So if the commission wanted to say, hey, you know what, we want part of that, and we want to invest this money into our fields so that way we can host these tournaments. Could we do that? I don't know if that's what they do over there, but I don't know how, I'm not sure, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable thinking that the folks would actually be staying here. Even if it was a tournament for multiple days, they could drive home from, you know, Harlingen to Brownsville, McAllen, and you know, from one county to the other. So is that stretching it to invest in something like that?
I think it's a good thing to pursue. And now, one of the things you would want to do is there's that category number 7 for sporting-related facilities. You have to be bracketed. You have to have a statute that allows you to expend the money for that purpose. I don't think, Mr. City Manager, I don't think Harlingen is yet bracketed for sporting-related facilities, is it?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. So what I would suggest is I could write up a bill draft for your city attorney and the city council to look at, and your CVB committee to look at as well, that would allow, just give you that tool in your tool chest. You don't have to do it, but if you find a project that you really like, that would be a sporting related facility, you'd have the authority already under state law.
Okay.
And the test is that you have to have at least 10 regional, state, or national tournaments at that facility already, so some historic facility. I think you mentioned a stadium that you already have that's, you know, then check how many tournaments they have. Let's say you're only getting 5 right now or 4. We'd maybe amend the statute for the bracketing for Harlingen for you to do it, you know, to get you in the door. That would be another tool. And then you could look at and have experts come in and not, so you don't have to just guess, what could you attract if you built that facility or enhanced that facility? And how much, what would be the right amount to spend on a hotel tax versus your economic development sales tax? I will tell you, if you have multi-day sports events, they do stay overnight. Even folks who are from the region. A lot of times, especially if it's younger kids, they don't want to be going back late. I remember I had an event in the Dallas Metroplex area, and they called me and they said, hey, Scott, can we spend hotel tax on this Battle of the Bands event? And I said, when do you hold it? And they said, Thursday. I said, what time? They said, between 6:30 and 8:30. And I said, well, do you have any overnight activity? And they said, Scott, they drive in and they drive right back home. I said, what if you were to do it on a Friday night? Start it a little bit later, maybe 7 and go to 9, and then do a juried competition all day Saturday and do an awards luncheon on Sunday. They did exactly that format, made a one-day, couple-hour event into a 3-day event, and within 1 year, they filled up every hotel in that community. I mean, for that event, and not just for one night, for the entire weekend. And that was one of those communities that had a lot of weekday business, but not a lot of weekend business. And so it was great for the hotels. They were happy to offer a competitive rate. And the event, all the restaurants benefited, the retail, the liquor stores, the convenience stations, everybody benefited by trying to figure out. I always like to say every event is eligible. You just need to adapt it to make it into a tourism and overnight activity event. So take a one-day event into a 2-day event or a 3-day event. Make it so it's during a time, incentivize if you have, in Harlingen, and let me ask the hoteliers, are you busier during the weekdays or the weekends?
Say weekdays.
So you need the most business on weekends, is that fair? So you might want to have higher incentives for the weekend and make it so that you're really competitive to bring it in, because then they can offer the combination of lower rates and you can offer more incentives to fill in that, and then that generates more hotel tax and sales tax and all the other taxes that are related to the activity. So I would love to visit with you and about the options for, developing your community. And it's not a sin if it helps your local residents as well. You want a facility, it can't be 365 days of hotel activity. We want you to fill in, typically a convention center is used about 100 days for actual convention activities and tourism events. But a lot of the other activities are local community activities. But you want to have the ability to book the convention center. I remember the city of Waco had a problem with their convention center where they weren't getting many meetings. And I said, well, what is your booking policy? First come, first serve. I said, do you have a window where people can book the entire facility for a big tourism event that takes priority over local events? And they said no. And I said, if you don't do that, you'll never have, because you have the little local chamber and the little sports activities and the bridge club and the senior nutrition luncheon. They had the facility where every day there was enough bookings there, you could never get the whole facility. So instead they said, within 3 months, you can book all of the facilities, but outside of 3 months, the CVB has priority to get a major event there. And so they changed that, and then they started they could book the whole facility. They had a priority. And what your window is of what you should allow for local events versus, regional or statewide events, you adjust based on when they call you. If you give most of your bookings, 60 days out or, 90 days out, then it'll allow a window for them to have priority for that facility. And that can help a lot with your and that would be for your sports facility as well.
Getting to sports, one sport that stands out a little bit is boxing.
Okay,
Because we could look at it as one gym versus another gym
okay.
in different areas in Harlingen and in the valley. But then, once you start to do that, you expand. We have all of Mexico that'll have gyms that would want to come up here, and then you go further north. So now you have several gyms going at it, and they could be here over the weekend. I don't know if that's possible. We had an event in April, which was the reenactment of the Alamo and the Goliad and San Jacinto battles. That would, I think, would benefit us to where we can expand that to a whole weekend.
100%.
I don't know how much the city invested into that. Do you know?
We didn't give them any money, nothing.
Well, we lost 2 commissioners. They died in fire.
Exactly, I still have the loans.
Oh, yeah.
And there's that event, the boxing that we can build up. We also had another event, which was a marathon from Donna to Harlingen.
So to address the law, you have the category for sporting-related events. So all the costs for putting that event on that day or the preparatory costs to get ready for that event, you already have the authority to do that for your boxing event or other sporting
So it
events.
just expands into,
And then if you want to make facility improvements, you look at which facility you have in the city that is already being used for regional, state, or national tournaments. And maybe you adapt that to be able to do more boxing events if that's your priority. And you could look at it, getting the category, getting bracketed in that sporting-related facility category. And like I said, the passage rate at the Capitol is typically around, 17 to 19% of the bills that are filed pass. We have passed every bill we have partnered with cities on for the last 24 years. Every single bill we've offered, we have been able to pass. I know that y'all offered legislation last session. Unfortunately, it was too late in the process by the time y'all came to us for us to try to help you as much as we'd like to. But I think that bill, would have passed if we had started with the version we started with an election and with the revised wording. And if you want to come back next session to try to offer that bill again, let's start now and get your Senate sponsor and your House sponsor and work the committee. We had already done a lot of work on that, and we'd be honored to help you if that's still a priority for your council.
Yeah, absolutely, I appreciate that, and
Yeah, so-
I think we'll be a little more prepared this
Yeah,
this
well,
time
come to
around.
us because y'all have 1,000 areas and departments under you. What we do is advocacy. So let us help you to make it easy. Let us start the process. We had already worked the Senate chair on that, and he was okay with it by the time, we had rewritten, some of the wording of the bill. So in fact, I have the wording of the bill with me, in case there was any questions. But we'd love to work with you on that, maybe on the sporting facility. Now, this next session may be a little crazy because we have all these battles in the House between the Democrats and the Republicans and who's going to be speaker and the Senate. So a lot of people are saying they're not sure if anything is going to pass this session. So all bets are off, but I can promise you this, we'll work with you, and if there's a chance of getting it passed, we're going to help you make it happen.
Could we also work on getting Harlingen bracketed for sports?
That's absolutely. Those would be the two items, the venue, the venue tax item and the sporting facility. And then if you have another priority, you can talk to us.
Because we would need that first before making any improvements, is that correct for?
Yes.
So, just so that I understand, our old stadium, yes, before, I don't know, how long ago was that? That was a long time ago.
Stadium?
Mhm. The White Wings was like
I think the White Wings left about 20 years ago.
okay, so a long time ago. So when you talk about what was held there before and kind of utilizing that, it doesn't matter how long ago?
It needs to be currently. You need to be able
Okay.
to say, and this isn't a very hard standard to meet, you have to have at least 10 regional, state, or national events. So if you look at a calendar year, that's like less than one a month.
Okay,
That
but
you have a
that we
tournament.
strive to do, or we have the history of already
That you have a
doing?
history of it happening. Now, let's say that you don't have that right now.
Uh-huh.
Let's figure out what you have and we can adapt the statute. The
It was a
standard under
minor-
the existing statute is 10 regional, state, or national tournaments, but we have other cities we've done with a different mix.
Because what I was thinking is there has been, right, interest in soccer for the city of Harlingen, and that maybe we need a Harlingen team for soccer, so it wouldn't necessarily be baseball
It
anymore.
doesn't matter what it's for.
Okay,
If it's a regional, state, or national tournament,
okay,
that has a hotel impact, which all of them do,
right.
and it doesn't say how much of an impact, you would qualify under the existing terms. And if not, we could work with you on what the terms are.
Yeah, because the stadium in question hasn't been used in about 20 years.
Or for a sporting event?
Yeah, so then that's.
But
what
does
we'd
it have
to,
any
like-
other sporting events that are done there or nothing?
It's just
It's
nothing.
dead.
Oh, it had that women's football league?
Oh, I don't know about that.
When I started, that was the last year that, I played. That was 10 years ago.
Oh, so it's only 10 years.
Okay, I thought it was longer, but,
Call it
and
dead.
then we also had, it was at the same stadium, that's where we had the the Texas, the battles, the Alamo battle where we lost 2 commissioners. Okay. So it was at that stadium that event was held. The Battle of the Alamo, San Jacinto, and Goliad. So that event was there, is trying to promote that.
Well, these are sporting events.
Okay.
Right.
So
So-
that's historical reenactment stuff, right?
Yes.
The
So that's
stadium
slightly
has been
different.
used for
Right.
events, because it's city property, so we have, many events there, from parks to, it has been utilized. It's not just sitting there and not being used,
Right.
but it's not being used for its intended purpose, so it would be hard to provide that data. So that's kind of what I was trying to figure out, whether, is it possible, since we don't have that, this is what we would like to do, and maybe seeing what is happening in another community, once, with it up and going.
Sure.
I don't know if you could use that, but we're not gonna have any, we don't have a stadium that is functioning, that just needs upgrading, because, to be able
Right.
to have better quality or attract more tournaments or anything like that, because it hasn't been used. But I was wondering if we could revive it, because it does need like new bleachers and other things that needs, that it really needs some work to be up and.
What you-
Can we do it with, even though we don't have to start with that?
Right. Under the current, thank you. Under the current state law, you need to have some sort of history, and the reason for that is everybody hopes that their facility will become a tourism or a tournament location. They want to make sure that they're using the hotel tax to invest in facilities that at least have some history of having that impact. Now, what I would encourage you to do is we could adapt the standard based on maybe if you have some events, but maybe not as much. Or the other, you could phase it in. Let's say that you phase in, you spend some city dollars on the facility that maybe aren't hotel tax. You get to the point where you can host at least 5 tournaments or 3 or 4 tournaments. And then you say, all right, can we rewrite the statute to show we have some history or some potential, and then invest more from the hotel tax? Or alternatively, you get it up to the point where you have the 10 regional, state, national. That's not a lot of tournaments. I mean, if you think about it, for a facility that, and especially since it can be regional. So if you just, no, please.
No, I was gonna say that I think our best bet for using that would either be the soccer complex or the sports complex. I don't think,
For those type, but those are, I guess you said regional,
Yeah.
so that.
it just has to be outside the county, right?
Regional is just outside of your city.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Going back to the tennis example, we just had
I was just
Western
thinking that.
Western Athletic Conference tennis tournament here in Harlingen that was broadcast on ESPN. Also, we didn't give them any money, and we didn't use any hot funds on that particular venue, but I think we'd like to bring them back because they're showed interest in coming back next year. So we'd like to bring them back and perhaps maybe just expand the facility a little bit more to offer more accommodations.
Well, you could do it both you could promote them under advertising and promotion, do a sponsorship. You could do it under event costs under category number 6. So let me make sure that I've covered all the categories so that you don't leave going, well, what about the other ones? We talked about convention centers. We talked about registration of convention delegates. We talked about advertising and promotion. The 4th category is promotion of the arts. There's a cap on how much you can spend under the arts. You can't spend more than 15% of what you bring in on the arts. And it's not enough that something is just an arts event. It also needs to have some impact on tourism and the hotel and convention industry.
Define arts.
Arts is literally from drama to sculpture to poetry, and they have a whole exhaustive list of arts under Chapter 351. There's not an arts form you can think of that is not covered. From motion pictures to creative writing, to any art form that anybody would recognize as an art form is going to be eligible.
Scott,
Yes.
could you add the 15% for the expenditures to promote the arts to the 15% for the historical restoration and preservation programs? So Harlingen has a very long history of architecture. And we have 2 nationally known architects that came and built a bunch of buildings, houses, and all that in the city, right? Under the arts, design, and architecture, design, and art and allied fields count as arts, right? And then on top of that, some of these buildings, for example, a city building that was designed and built by Alan Tanagachi, needs repairs, and so I think that would fall under
Historic restoration.
historic preservation. Now, because we have a history of it, and because these guys built so many houses and properties in Harlingen, we could turn around, I'm thinking, just out loud, that we can create a annual event in which we do a tour, right?
100% you could.
We did start one. Shane Strubart and Brianna Vela started, it's like mid-century modern homes in
Correct.
Harlingen by this architect. So there's some homes that are still in pristine condition, including the bank right here in front of Coletti's. So there's some architecture that's still in good condition, and they would meet. I met with them a couple of times, and sometimes when we're doing like branding for the city, I'm like, we need to go back to mid-century modern and tie in that architecture that we had. It was like a very big stronghold. So we've kind of discussed it amongst ourselves, but they did start like a little club, and you go to the homes, and the homeowner is very proud, right, of their architect home. But it would be great to expand on it. I think they both kind of COVID, right? That excuse kind of happens, right? But so it'd be great to expand on that again, because it is something that would attract people to come and stay overnight to visit multiple locations around the
And you
community.
did the perfect marriage of all those categories. I love that you're looking at the law. It would count as a promotion of the arts.
He's an
It would
attorney.
count.
He's a lawyer.
He's a lawyer.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We had a quota of no more than one at a table. I thought I bet the quota.
I think there's a lot here.
Oh, now I'm truly frightened. All right.
So then, what I'm thinking is, if we need to do renovations on one of the buildings that the city owns, we can go up to the 15% in one category and then create the program using 5% of the other category and use another 10% to also then help renovate that building, correct?
Incorrect.
Incorrect, okay.
To renovate?
Because as a lawyer, historical restoration and preservation would anticipate capital costs of renovating a facility. But there's been AG opinions under promotion of the arts that they say there's nothing in there that talks about construction or renovation. Now, could you promote it in terms of advertising your walk or advertising what you did for an event based on the renovation? Yes, but you couldn't do renovation under both.
Okay,
So-
only preservation. So I can max out the 15% on
Preservation
preservation?
would be under the historic category.
Correct.
Category number 5. And again, there's a 15% cap on historical restoration preservation, a 15% cap on the arts.
But that
And
means
is that is that annually?
Yeah.
Yes.
So if we've never used it before, does it carry over?
Theoretically,
theoretically.
thank you. Yes, hypothetically, certain words I'm just never gonna get, I guess. Hypothetically, theoretically, yes, you could. In fact, you could look at some of your reserve money and say, all right, from this reserve money, but you'd have to trace it to the years and make sure that you weren't in those years already expending your 15% of the arts or 15% of the historical, and take out what you had spent in those budget years, and what remains under those categories you could probably
We
trace.
could link it to the museum and to like the auditorium, so that's probably where that 15% was used.
You go
in
to the
past.
cap every year?
No, we don't.
No,
Not the
we don't hit the
auditorium.
cap every year, no. So there is always
There's a
fund balance.
differential.
There's always fund balance,
So it'd
yeah.
be interesting to see what that,
Yeah, we would probably just need to look at the budget as a whole, like the whole hot funds, because I only manage the Convention and Visitors Bureau budget of it, so it's not the full amount. So, but the percentages come from the full amount. So we would definitely have to be like a more in-depth look to the whole budget
You'd have to trace them
and
out.
what's been used, yeah.
Yeah.
So we never
But-
use that all.
But the way you're thinking, I agree.
Okay.
But you always have to separate out, there's a difference between capital costs,
Correct.
facility renovations or construction versus just event costs. Certain categories are eligible for one, and certain categories are eligible for both.
Now, Scott, can we use that 15% on the preservation program to be then leveraged for state and federal grants for reservation and preservation?
You could under the hotel tax laws. Now, whether or not those programs allow or require various funds or have certain mandates is a separate issue.
Okay, but it's fine on this side of it.
On this side, under chapter 350 on the tax code, you
Yeah,
could,
they're municipal funds.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right, so any other questions on expenditures to promote the arts? Okay, And then historical restoration preservation is category number 5. Again, that would be reenactment events, or it could be facade improvements downtown or for historic buildings. They have to be structures that are actually tourism venues. So if it's a facility that doesn't have tours or tourists don't come in to see it as an attraction, you wouldn't expend the money on it. So, any questions about historical restoration and preservation?
The ID building.
No, the state law did, in fact, I tell the story, I had a house in Lakeway, Texas, we're just outside of Austin, and they had a historic marker on the oldest, homestead in Lakeway, which was only, I think, 38 years old. So I complained to the mayor, I should have a historic marker, since I'm older than your oldest building. So there's no definition under the state law of what's historic. It doesn't have to be state designated or national historic designation. It's basically a call of the city council as to what they consider historically significant. Okay, so historical restoration and preservation. Category number 6, we talked about sporting related events. Category number 7, we're gonna work with you to get authority, sporting related facilities, if that's what the council wants to do. Category number 8 and 9.
Excuse me, Scott, just before we hop off 7. So going back to what Gabe was talking about, we have a park in town that we hosted that tennis tournament, right? And we have a big swimming pool there that we host events for, like, regional triathlons and swimming tournaments during the summertime and all that. Could this, if we were to consider the whole park a sporting facility, and it talks about enhancement or upgrading of existing sport facilities, could we build a massive, let's say, pickleball facility to then host statewide tournaments?
Yes.
And that one does have history.
Correct.
That stuff does have history. So it's easier to trace that back.
You have to have a history of, remember, the 10 regional, state, or national tournaments. And you have to realize that whatever you expend at the show, that you get back at room nights over 5 years, or, you don't meet that ROI requirement, but yes. And so, that's category number 7. Category number 8, tourism-related shuttles. So in other words, shuttles of hotel guests to area attractions, to your downtown, to your convention center, to other hotels, to tourism attractions. It's not your city buses. It's not general city transit. It would be special shuttles that take people from the area hotels all to an attraction or to shopping. That's category number 8. Any questions about tourism-related shuttles? Category, go ahead.
Those shuttles have to be within the city, they cannot go out?
That's interesting. I'll look at the statute, but I think the intention is to be attractions within the city. But I think if you're an attraction just outside of the city, no one would probably object. If you happen to be going to the county fairgrounds and it's just outside of the city and that's where you're taking everybody, I think it'd be fine.
I think the last time we used that,
Provision.
that provision, we only had the shuttles going inside the city. We had a Rotary International from Mexico come into Harlingen to host their annual convention at the auditorium. That was before we had the convention center, and so we hosted the families to go around town shopping.
That's nice.
Couldn't you use this to almost supplement a bus route?
No, because the majority of the people, it's only transporting tourists that's eligible.
Correct, but if you did it from the hotels to the shopping centers, like to our downtown Jackson, then to like our birding facility, things like that, wouldn't you? You're hitting all the points and you're hitting it from the hotels.
But is this your general city bus?
We don't have a general city bus, so this would be the
Valley
first of
Metro.
them.
This would be a special shuttle ride. Yeah, the intent is for it to be for special events.
For a event.
Right, for a event or a series of events. And so it wouldn't be just a general route that goes all the time. Although really, one of the cities that did this was South Lake. And they particularly wanted to have a regular shuttle that went between the hotels and their big shopping area. And so they did it that way. But again, it should be, the people which it's transporting should be hotel guests. And that's the way it's written under the law.
And you want them kind of in your community, going
Right.
from one place to
Right, exactly. And then the final category is category number 9 is tourism-related signage. That's basically not your welcome to Harlingen, but it would be the sign, here's where the you know, this museum is, this is where our historic theater is, this is where our downtown shopping is, this is where our convention center is. So signage and directional signage to your major attractions. So those are your 9 categories: convention centers, registration of convention delegates, advertising and promotion, promotion of the arts, historical restoration and preservation, sporting-related events, sporting-related facilities, tourism-related signage, and shuttles between area attractions of, you know, transporting hotel guests. What other questions can I help you with on any of these?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
On the shuttles, what I was thinking is not just within the city, we have some natural wildlife, parks in the area, which could be about 10, 15 miles. We have 2 or 3. So could these shuttles be used for that?
Let me
Bring
do
them in,
this.
They stay in the.
Let me
hotels?
look at the statute. I believe it says it talks about within the city, but let me look at the statute. And if we're doing it along, getting you into sporting related facilities, if it's important to you to have it within the vicinity of the city, we could amend the statute to address that as well. So you just have to look at what your priorities are.
I think something that we are working on throughout the county, actually both counties, is our trails. And that does bring in lots of folks from all over. And Harlingen has been putting in a lot of work in getting the trails to be competitive. And so we have, what is it that what did we do? It's been 2 years already. Is it the Battle of, or what is it called? The Down at the Arroyo or down? Showdown at the Arroyo. So that is an event. And so I know that people from, I'm pretty sure they're staying in the hotels. We just don't track it because it's not something that we're promoting. But the biking community is just growing and growing here in our community. And so they come from Mexico. There was people from Canada ride and just like from all over, and obviously throughout the valley. And Harlingen is the only place, the next one is south of San Antonio, to host these kinds of events. So since we've done that 2 years in a row, could we use some of the money to, not just to help with putting on the event, which I think that we should do and have some marketing of it, but also maybe to improve the park that is
The site of the tour, the
right.
site of the trails.
because so it has to
Yeah,
be.
there's a provision in the hotel tax laws that specifically says you can't expend local hotel tax on infrastructure, and that would be roads, streets, parks, sidewalks.
Even the trails themselves.
Even trails, and trails, I get this question every session, because there's a lot of tourists who go to trails, and frankly, there's a lot of tourists who go to parks, you know, and the lakes and things like that. But there's huge pushback by a lot of folks on they don't want to go down that path because they are, from the travel and tourism industry, they're afraid that once you start allowing hotel tax to be spent on the parks, you'll no longer have any money for your convention center or for tourism-related events or tourism-related marketing, because it'll all go to general parks.
Okay.
And so they have, you know, I had actually worked out a compromise with the Texas City Managers Association on a parks bill. And the governor, I mean, it was killed by so many people. I died 1,000
A big no,
deaths.
Norma.
Yeah. You've been there, Mayor, right? Right. Yeah. It's here. I thought I was doing this blessing, and and found something that was a win-win. And the governor's office killed it, and the Senate officers killed it, and I mean, it was just dead, and dead again. So and I got an email this morning from McKinney asking about trails and parks, and I said, well, let me just tell you how this. Let me tell you about my past lives that ended abruptly.
But sponsoring and helping with the promotion of the event is fine.
Absolutely,
But just
event-related
not
costs.
the,
Not
and
the- not the
even since
facility.
we already know that we have people, like our Harlingen Marathon, that
Yeah.
you guys do a phenomenal job. We know that a lot of people come
You have
from.
to have that form.
So it goes back to getting the form to the people putting on the event to make sure they fill it out before.
So
and they fill it
I took
after.
notes, and I think that that's something that we probably need to really kind of hone in on in terms of I really like the idea that you said if you book a room, there's a different rate,
It's such a smart way to
it's-
do it, because then they document all your impact. And then you figure out, even the ones who don't get the discount, that they're telling you something, we're a local event.
Yeah, we get
Correct.
data anyway, either
Correct.
way.
Right. And it also clues into the CVB about ways, when they fill out that form and say, yeah, we have a negotiated rate, and yeah, we're doing this, then there can be an automatic notice to CVB to offer, how can we help you? How can we because that'll make it where the event's more special. They may not be aware of all the promotion. It's such a win-win opportunity.
Right, and everybody wants a discount, so they're gonna do
Oh.
it if it's
Yeah.
on there, if it's an option. I think that's a good idea. I hadn't thought about it, and honestly, until,
Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad if this is helpful.
yes, thank you very much.
And I have Scott's information that I could give you if you guys want to like email him, you think of something later down the line, as you keep looking at the budget, to be like, would this work or would this not?
Yeah,
Great
absolutely.
resource.
In fact, I'll just- if you
I already
pass
want
these
a
down.
new soccer team, pickleball courts, Casa del Sol, I don't know, like what.
What else could we need, right?
Yeah.
We have submitted.
Just don't ask them who the best pickleball player is, because that's a whole different conversation.
It's me, clearly.
You?
There's no doubt that I'm the best one.
And it figures you're also the lawyer.
Oh, my goodness.
What other questions y'all have for me?
I
If
don't.
you could send us, I don't know, maybe you already get an email about it, but like the best practices you've seen from different cities. Like, I really like the story you told us about Fredericksburg, right?
Thank
Like
you.
the beautiful revitalization of the whole
Right,
town, right? Things like that, or if you have a mailer or something like that, just so there's no reason we need to reinvent the wheel, right? We just pick and choose.
100%. What I would encourage you is, I have not put into paper the 24 years that I've been working with municipalities and counties and partnerships. But I can tell you this, I would welcome when you guys are ready to say, here are our goals, or we're gonna have a bunch of folks to come talk. I'll come out with you and talk to you about what communities have tried the ideas that you're talking about, and maybe things that worked and didn't work. And I wish I had it all reduced to writing, but I'd be happy to come and be part of the solution and be part of the discussion. And that's part of the beauty of having a partnership. As y'all do better and you feel like you have more resources, we feel like we provided value.
So you're staying in the Harlingen Hotel tonight?
I have a booking tonight, but I have a flight tonight at 8 if I get out in time to get it. If not, I have a flight at 8 a.m. So-
Well, we should let you make your flight. We
Well,
really.
my priority is to make sure I
the
take care of
opposite.
anything you need.
Make him stay.
I'll make it stay. That's what I was.
You're one of those mean
Wait a minute.
Ford was gonna tell some great stories about being in the Marine Corps for the next hour and a half, right?
I want to hear the railroad track story.
It's a PG story.
What other questions do y'all have?
Yeah, this has been very, very informative. I have been, very cautious in terms of like how we go about spending this money. So I think everybody's been really conservative in making any changes. Everything's kind of stayed the same, I think, right? I don't think we've done anything kind of out of the box since we've continued on with the things that were already happening in our community. And so it's nice to know.
I would tell you
there are
three of the
options.
things that you have done that I would say, in my experience, both at the Municipal League, the Attorney General's Office, and at the Hotel Industry Association, the trade group, the three most important things is you hire the right people. You have one of the best city managers in the state, you have one of the best tourism directors in the state, and working within those capacities, you're gonna have good programs. And then the fact that you have a CVB advisory committee with hoteliers on it, those are the three most important things in a successful program. Because your hoteliers will tell you what works, what hasn't worked, and you have people that are gonna look at it. Because, my master's in city management, I know that the challenge they have, there's always the balance of, we have to fund, with limited capacity with rollback rates now at 3.5%. I don't know how it's possible for cities that only, have that little bit of revenue, but, yeah, I understand. There's always pressure to try to transfer money from dedicated funds to all your general fund programs. So when you have a city manager who does it right and says, I'm gonna stick with the law, and a mayor who says, we're gonna be conservative on making sure we do things right, and a CVB exec who knows your history and feels the local dynamics, you're doing it right. And so, you have the cake, now you can work on the frosting.
I told him you need to come down more often, especially that part about the city manager.
100%.
You already gave Daniel a couple compliments.
I've never.
Yes. What else can we, what other questions y'all have?
No. Did you have any
Scott,
questions?
thank you for coming down.
Javier has a
I was
question.
gonna bring up a scenario, going back to the White Wing Stadium. So if we were to host, and this is talking about youth sports, but if we were to host tournaments with, let's say, Pony, and they were to have their games, and then the final, let's say it's a World Series at the White Wing Stadium. Could we do that to start creating that history?
100% you could. In fact, you could say, you know what, we want to be able to use the statute, so we're gonna do some economic incentives to bring these tournaments, to get that history, get it, use it, and move forward. 100%.
It has to be the history and what it is that we want to do.
But,
Right?
no,
To
not
be able to
necessarily.
improve-
It could be 10 regional, state, or national tournaments, and then you met the statute.
Of
and then
any sport?
Any sport,
Okay.
We're
Yeah.
gonna get some teams on the phone.
yeah,
Well, we've had a lot of interest. We just, we don't have a lot of money.
yeah. But for the record, I get this question, cook-offs, chili cook-offs are not a sport.
No.
I can't tell you how many times I've had that question.
Eating it and keeping it down sometimes is a sport, right?
Okay, all right, I would believe that, but a challenge, but not a sport.
We have quite a few of those at that stadium, by the way.
All right.
And so for these events, like Javier mentioned, if we want to start getting that history, we can use CVB money to be able to promote the event. And
Under the marketing or under the event costs.
so maybe that's something that y'all can kind of work together to think of how we can get the history because it doesn't seem that like, you don't need that many games or events.
The way we came up with that standard is I said to the mayor of Round Rock, how many events do you already have? And he said, probably 24. I said, so let's set a minimum of 10.
Right.
And I said, how many years would it take you to show the hotel nights from existing and new business? He said, 2, 3. I said, we'll give you 5. So we didn't want to create a standard cities couldn't use. We wanted you to use it. We wanted it to be something that would make sense. You know, we come from a win-win perspective. So we want you to be successful and we want to be successful.
Wonderful. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Good scope, thank you.
You're welcome.
you.
My takeaways are to work with you on your legislation, both for the sporting-related facilities, get you authority for that, so we'll write up a bill on that. And then we'll send you the last version of the bill you had from last session. And we'll start early
Yes.
On that to help you get that.
And we have a new
He asked
law.
me who it was, so.
Yes, okay, so, and we'll be in touch, I'm
Well,
sure.
and I'll be here again the moment you ask me.
Thank you, we really appreciate it. Anybody else? Nope. All right, well then,
Thank you,
we
Scott.
are adjourned. We hope you make your flight despite these
I'll get you
people.
there quickly.
Okay, I think I'm gonna be just fine.
So long as you fly from Valley International, if not,
I
we're,
am.
okay, because if not, we're gonna stay here a little longer.
We have a lot more questions, right?